Right now, fire is probably the most ordinary thing in your life. It's a button on your stove, a lighter in your pocket, a flame you can replace in seconds. If it goes out, you make another one without even thinking about it. So here's a question almost nobody asks. What happened when ancient humans lost their fire? Not medieval humans, not ancient Romans, not even ancient Egyptians. We're going back much further than that, 300,000 years, back when there were no cities, no farming, no written history. Just small groups of people gathered around a single flame that stood between them and the cold, the darkness, and whatever was waiting beyond the edge of the firelight. The answer completely changes how we think about early humans, and it changed the way I think about something I do every single day without even noticing. Because that wasn't just a hypothetical. For most of human history, it was one of the scariest situations imaginable. I remember the first time I read the actual research behind this. I had to stop and reread it, because it wasn't the story I expected. I always assumed early humans could just make fire whenever, the way we picture it in movies. 2 sticks, some rubbing, a spark, done. It turns out that's not remotely how it worked, and the truth is, a lot more fragile, and honestly, a lot more human. Let's go back 300,000 years to a cave in what's now Israel called Qesem Cave. In 2014, a team led by Dr. Ruth Shahak Gross, working with Tel Aviv University archaeologists Ran Barkai and Avi Gopher, was analyzing the floor of that cave using infrared spectroscopy, essentially chemically reading the ground itself. And right in the center of the cave, they found something remarkable. A thick, layered deposit of wood ash, roughly 4 square meters across, packed with tiny fragments of burned bone and heat-altered soil. Here's the part that matters. It wasn't one fire. It was layer after layer after layer of ash, stacked on top of each other. Evidence of the exact same spot being used, abandoned, and used again, over and over, for an enormous stretch of time. The researchers described it as unequivocal evidence of repeated, habitual fire building at one fixed location. Around that hearth, they also found flint tools clustered in specific zones. One area for cutting meat, a separate area for working hides, which means this wasn't just a fire. It was the center of an organized camp built around a flame that people kept returning to, generation after generation, for tens of thousands of years. Think about what that actually requires. Not just knowing fire is useful. Trusting it enough to build your entire daily life around one exact spot on the ground. Now you'd assume a species capable of that could obviously make fire from nothing, anytime they wanted. I assumed the same thing. I was wrong, and so, it turns out, were a lot of researchers. Until they started looking at people alive today who still live something close to that lifestyle. There's a study, a cross-cultural survey, covering 93 hunter-gatherer groups from the historical and ethnographic record that set out to answer exactly this question. How often did these groups actually know how to start a fire from scratch? The finding was startling. Several of the groups studied did not know how to make fire at all, not struggled with it, did not possess the knowledge. And in many of the groups that could make fire, that specific skill wasn't spread evenly through the population. It was held by a small number of individuals, which means for a lot of human history, keeping the fire alive wasn't a chore. It might have been one of the single most important responsibilities a person in that group could carry. If you lost the flame and nobody present knew the exact technique, or had the exact materials, or had the strength and patience it takes, you weren't lighting a new one by dinner time. You were possibly facing days, or longer, in the cold, in the dark, with your food raw and predators significantly less afraid of you. I keep coming back to this image whenever I think about it. Somewhere, in a group like the one at Qesem Cave, there was almost certainly a person, or maybe a small handful of people, whose unspoken job every single night was to check the coals before anyone slept. Bank them just right. Not too much fuel, not too little. Wake before dawn to breathe life back into the embers before they fully died. not because someone assigned it to them on a schedule, because they understood better than anyone else in the group exactly how easily it could all go dark. Permanently. That's not a small task. That's someone quietly holding the survival of everyone around them in their hands, every single night for years. And it goes back even further than Qesem Cave. In 2012, archaeologist Francesco Berna and his team, examining sediment nearly 100 feet inside Wonderwerk Cave in South Africa, found microscopic traces of burned bone and ash so deep inside the cave that a wildfire or lightning strike couldn't plausibly explain it. That evidence points to controlled fire use roughly 1 million years ago, long before our own species, Homo sapiens, even existed. Whoever or whatever that early hominin actually was, they were already this dependent on a flame someone had to keep. But fire didn't just keep people warm and fed. There's a study I find genuinely beautiful from anthropologist Polly Weissner, published in 2014. She spent years recording actual conversations among the Juhwansi Bushmen of the Kalahari, comparing what people talked about during the day versus what they talked about at night around the fire. And the difference was almost like two different species talking. Daytime conversation was practical. Complaints, economics, gossip that policed behavior, who owed who what. But firelight conversation transformed into something else entirely: storytelling. Tales about distant relatives, myths, the exploits of ancestors, spiritual experiences, humor. Wiesner described fire as extending the day into a second kind of time, one where the group's imagination, memory, and the sense of belonging to something larger than the daily grind could finally come out. In other words, the fire wasn't just keeping bodies alive. It was creating the one part of the day set aside for meaning, for imagination, for becoming, even briefly, something more than a group of tired, hungry people surviving until tomorrow. So here's where I land on this one, and it genuinely changes how I think about something I do every single day without noticing. You will probably use fire today. A stove, a candle, a lighter, a gas flame under a pot, and it will cost you nothing. No skill, no vigilance, no fear, no gratitude. We solved fire so completely that we forgot it was ever a problem worth solving. But somewhere, for a period of human history that outlasts almost everything else we've ever built, someone's entire quiet job was making sure a flame survived the night. Not glamorous, not written down anywhere, no monument. Just someone, awake a little longer than everyone else, watching the coals, so that in the morning there would still be warmth, still be cooked food, still be a reason for everyone to gather in one place after dark, and become, for a few hours, something more than survivors. Next time you flick a lighter without thinking, that's worth a half-second of thought, because somebody, somewhere, spent their whole life making sure the fire didn't die, so the next morning could begin. And for thousands of generations, that quiet responsibility helped shape everything that came after, including the simple moment where you can create a flame without even thinking about it.